Welcome to Couch Talk. Today, we'll talk about sex. We'll put aside a few taboos and have a frank discussion with the most uncensored woman I know.
I'm Dr. Laurie Betito. I'm a clinical psychologist. I'm a talk show host. I specialize in sexuality. I'm also an author and the president of the Sexual Health Network of Quebec. And I am very passionate about sex education, not only of youth, but of adults and older people.
Dr. Betito, can I call you Laurie?
Yes, please do.
There's a lot of exciting things for us to talk about. I mean, you know, the sex industry is something to talk about.
Yes, we could talk for hours about that, exactly. I suppose, yes.
But first, let's talk about your book. You have a brand new book going on.
I do. It just came out in September, and thankfully it's doing very well. I think the topic is timely.
Right.
There's, you know, it's about sex over 50, and there's not much written about it. And it's a population that's completely, really ignored. And so when it came out, people were like, oh, yeah, okay, something for me, something for me.
Right. Why do you think it's so ignored, that age group?
You know, everything, when we think of sex, we think of younger people,
right.
You know, great bodies, great, everything you see how often do we see, exactly, how often do we see 50 and 60-year-olds in movies making out or in sex scenes?
Right.
We don't see that, so we're not used to that. And so it's ignored, really, in large part. So I wanted to do something that, especially because I was turned 50,
right.
and all my friends are 50, and we were talking, and I saw in my clients, and says, you know, something's missing here. There's a lot of misinformation, sometimes basic things that could change your sex life. So I decided I'm going to put it down in a book.
Right, and which you did, the Sex Bible for people over 50. And it's quite a graphic book as well.
Yes, people have called it erotic, not
erotic.
Right, not so pornographic, but erotic.
Erotic,
right?
But they're a good-looking 50-year-old couple.
Well, he's like 57. The guy in the book he's a grandfather.
What his diet is.
He's a grandfather, and she's 54.
Oh wow! You need to tell this couple that they look amazing.
They look great. I know. Well, listen, you know, it is a book, and we do want to sell copies.
Right.
So. Of course. I mean, we have to be realistic too, right?
Now, some of the advice in the book, because it's not just great pictures, it is a how-to book. It gives you great advice in it, and I find that some of the advice in the book could be used for long-term relationships also. You know, when the flames die out a little bit.
You're absolutely right.
The advice could be used there.
Right.
Okay.
You're absolutely right, because there are certainly we looked at, the focus was 50-year-olds plus, you know, could be 70 too, because there are changes that happen to our bodies that we need to adapt to. So a lot of people would say, oh, I'm too old, or forget about it. No, you don't have to give up pleasure for that, that we can adapt to it. So it's about adaptation. But there are many chapters in there that talk about using sex toys and how to spice things up. And it talks about desire, sexual desire, which is very different for men and women sometimes, and in long-term relationships. So yes, it's very applicable to people in long-term relationships.
Okay. In your research, do you find that there's any difference in terms of like Montrealers' sex life from other places? Because I read somewhere that Americans were not having a lot of sex compared to other countries.
I don't know, who says that? Cosmo magazine? You know, that's actually not true. There's places where you wouldn't think that they're having a lot of sex, which is in like the deep south, which they are. So, you know, these numbers to me mean nothing.
They're just fluff.
They're just numbers. It doesn't mean anything. I don't want to compare, you know, who are we to compare Montrealers or not? Or maybe because in the winter time we have more sex. I don't know. Like, it's, so what?
We need to stay warm in the winter or something.
Yeah. Exactly.
Do you get a lot of interesting questions and more, I'm guessing, racier questions than that on your radio show?
Yes. You know what? I've been doing this for 15 years. We just celebrated our 15th year on the air. And I have just reams of questions and questions and questions. And they're always interesting. And, you know, I always say no question is a stupid question. And it's anonymous because it's radio. So people get to ask whatever they want. And they're relationship questions. They're questions about performance. There's questions about, am I normal? Like this, am I normal? Sometimes they're medical questions. So I bring in medical professionals to answer those. And so, I mean, it really runs the gamut. And it's such a pleasure because of that, and it gives me an opportunity to educate on a topic that not many people talk about.
And do you ever get really surprised with some of the questions?
Not anymore.
Not anymore?
Not anymore. Not anymore. Sometimes I play a game with my listeners. Okay, stump Dr. Laurie time, you know. Find me something I don't know anything about. Of course there are. There's new terminology. There's, you know, look, sexuality is so vast. You know, kink is vast and all kinds of other things. So, yeah, there are some things that, oh, gee, I never heard that term. Okay, let me look into that a little bit. So.
Now, as a clinical psychologist, when did you decide to specialize in sexuality?
Oh, wow. That was a long time ago, before I ever went into the field of psychology, really. I did a kind of circuitous way to get to where I am now. So I spent a lot of years in school. What I did was I started off with a bachelor's degree in psychology. And then I went on to do a bachelor's degree in social work. So I was in the social work field for a while. And while I was in social work, I was working with youth protection services. And while there, I had a lot of clients who were incest survivors, sexual abuse survivors. I worked on cases where there was child pornography, and back then there was no internet, right? So child pornography cases, and I started to really get more into that, and then I decided to go back to school. So I went back to do a master's in social work. While I was there was a teacher there who taught a course in human sexuality, and took her course, you know, fell in love with everything that she was teaching. I said, I want to be her.
Really? Where's this? Which school?
This was at McGill.
McGill, okay.
I said, I want to be her. And so I started to ask her, where'd you get your training? You know, where'd you do all that? So I followed in her footsteps and got my training at the Montreal General Hospital with a medical specialist there, a sexuality specialist there. And that's where it began. And then, you know, then I went back to school to do a master's PhD in psychology. So,
That's a lot of school. How many years is this?
I spent 15 years of my life in university. But you know what? I loved every minute of it. So I did it because of the love of academia. And also just, it was great. It was a great experience. You know, scholarships. I was getting scholarships. So I was kind of being paid to go to school. So I said, why should I work?
Why not?
You know, I'm not going to work when I can go to school and feed my brain and get paid to feed my brain. So that was really cool.
And it also shows that you could always go back and do more, you know. Sometimes people are afraid of returning back to school.
Or they want to finish really fast. Like I only got my PhD. I finally graduated after I had my 2 kids.
Oh, okay.
So I was already in my early 30s.
Okay.
Right? And so I had done like, you know, I was still a professional in terms of social worker, and then I had a master's degree and whatever. But really, I finished everything at that point. And so what? If it took me extra years or whatever, it was all great experience.
Right. So even then, you were multitasking quite a bit.
I guess that's my nature. Yeah, now it's a little more, but yeah.
Right. And so at what point did you start the show, and how did you end up having the radio show?
That was everything. It's funny, a lot of things that happened in my life that have set the course of my career happened by accident. Or happened as like an opportunity that just came up, right? Being at the right place at the right time. So at one point, many years ago, 25 years ago, I had finished my training at the Montreal General Hospital, and I was working at a clinic, a sex clinic there. And a talk show host came to the clinic and said, I want to do a show about sexuality on Mix 96. At the time was FM 96.
Right.
And who's interested? You know, and I said, oh, okay, I'll go. You know, I figured I'll give it a try. If I mess up, I will do it again, you know. So I did it, and I stayed 9 years there.
Wow.
So that was a show that was once a week for 2 hours. And the person who had started that show was moved to our sister station, CJAD, and decided, you know what, let's put on a sex show there in talk radio. It was the first time someone had actually done that in talk radio here and in English radio. And I got my own show. And that started 15 years ago, and it's a nightly show. And I've been doing it a long time.
Right.
long time.
The student in you was the first one to volunteer for the task.
Yeah, and you know, it was scary. When I was offered my own show, it was very scary. It was, I'm not a radio person. Like I'm a clinician. Like this is me. I didn't study radio. I didn't study any of that. And I was nervous as hell. The first 3 weeks before that, I was in the bathroom a lot and very, very nervous. And I said, you know, what's the worst thing that can happen?
Right.
That I bomb completely? Okay, people will forget about it eventually, right? And I'll just do something else. It's fine. So I said, I'm going to give it a try. You have to take the opportunities presented.
Right.
And, you know, you always have to ask, okay, so if I screw up, what's going to happen? What's the worst thing that can happen?
Right. I feel like that's a common trait in the women I interviewed on the couch. They're just so fearless. I mean, the fear was there, but they don't let it stop them.
Right, exactly.
You know? And they still tried, and they still volunteered, and they did what they love, and it somehow the path led them to where they are now.
And it's not that I wasn't scared. In many things that I've tried, I was scared. When I was offered a television show, I was very scared to be on television, or the very first time I was on television. All very scary events in one's life. But once you start and once you do it, it really does become second nature. You just have to get past that one fear. And as long as you tell yourself, what's the worst that can happen?
Right.
And usually, if you put it in perspective, it's worth a shot.
Right.
It's worth a shot. Yeah.
I wanted to know, this is a bit of a hot topic, and in the media it seems to come and go depending on, you know, what's going on, new policies and so on. But what's your take on sex ed in school these days?
That's a very hot topic and a very kind of complicated issue in many ways. We don't have mandatory sex education in our Quebec high schools just yet. But from what I know, they are working on it. And this is something that should be coming down the pike. So hopefully we're getting there, but we still need advocacy for sex education.
Right.
I'm the president of an organization, which is a nonprofit called the Sexual Health Network of Quebec. And we advocate for sex education in schools, and we provide free sex education in schools. So, you know, schools can contact us and we go in there. We pay the educators, and this way we offer them.
During school hours
during
or
school
after
hours?
hours?
No, during school hours, and, you know, but not everybody takes us up on it, and it's about fitting it into the curriculum. So that's why I believe it's really necessary to have it so that every kid gets it across the board. It's not just one high school gets it, another one doesn't. I mean, there's some great programs out there, and some high schools are doing amazing work. But you need people who are trained and people who want to do it and who are comfortable teaching it. So I think we're moving in the right direction. I hope it happens in my lifetime.
Hopefully.
And I'm kidding, of course.
It better.
Yeah. Next few years. I would say the next few years, yeah.
I mean, it's valuable information. But what about people who, maybe for cultural or religious reason, they just feel like that's something that should be taught at home, or maybe the kids are too young at a certain age to have this type of information?
Unfortunately, the parents are not in a position to make that decision exactly, because they think they're too young. But if we look at the reality of what's out there and what the kids are exposed to, parents aren't, you know, they're not really necessarily so aware that their kids are already exposed to pornography and all kinds of stuff outside of the home. And they're thinking, oh, I want to keep my child innocent. But they're doing a disservice to their child, because information does not lead to action. Just because you educate about sexuality or how to put on a condom or whatever else doesn't lead to actually doing it. In fact, the opposite is true. Studies have shown that kids who know, who have information, whose parents talk to them about sex, delay their sexual activity. So the evidence is there, and it's evidence-based. And we have to follow that if your child opts out of it or you don't want your child to do it, I guess there's nothing we could do. But it is part of, it should be part of, and it will be, like geography, like history. Are you going to tell your kids you can't go to history class because you don't like what they're teaching in terms of creationism, for example, or creation theory, or whatever it is, or evolution, because, you know, you don't believe in it?
Right.
You know what I mean? So who's the judge here? We have to allow the educators to do their job.
Right.
Exactly. As parents, we're the ones responsible for teaching the values. But the information comes from the school without the bias of values, right? Just present the information as it is and have the parents teach the values.
Right. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Now, with everything that you've learned in the past 15, 20 years, because you've been on TV, on the radio for that long, with everything you know now, what advice would you give your younger self?
Oh, my younger self followed this path, so I would say good for you, young self, for taking the chance, and even though you were scared, and you know, and so I have a lot of mentees, if you will, so people who contact me who say, I want to do what you're doing, I want to follow kind of that kind of thing. So I teach them, specialize, find something you're passionate about, something you really love to do, and explore that. There are many avenues. It's not just one thing. Go just in an office or whatever. You can write, you can do magazines, you can blog, there's so many ways to spread your knowledge and have access to people. For me, it's a huge privilege to be able to talk to thousands of people every night, to be able to dispel myths, misconceptions, and just have open dialogue about sexuality, which, you know, not too many people do that. So it's great.
So they should just find something and specialize in it, and then see what venues are available to them too.
Yes, find a passion, and with that passion will come opportunities, and don't ever say no to an opportunity. Right. Take it up, even if you think you can't do it, because what stops us is our own fear of ourselves in terms of, oh, I'm not going to be able to do that, or I can't do that kind of thing, you know. Well, why can't you? Right. You could try, you know, and then see, and then you can say I can't, but first try it. Before you say that.
Well, that's amazing advice, and advice that I sometimes have to remind myself as well. So thank you so much for joining us on the couch today. Thank you for the book.
Thanks for having
for all
me.
the information. My pleasure. And thank you to you guys for joining us on another racy episode of Couch Talk, and we will see you next time.
Wish to see you, wish to see you, made all the colors.